a little different than what we have in the States,
Yep.
or even it comes from Argentina.
Right. So it was a big deal for Mitchell to do this Wagyu beef event. He and David McDougall, who was on the show a few weeks ago prior to us leaving, he was also on this trip. And so that was their thing, was to make sure that we had a Wagyu beef ceremony almost.
The whole thing, go in there, they make you take your shoes off.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh no, I'm not going to sit on the floor to eat this, because that's going to be real hard.
It was a very traditional restaurant, Japanese traditional, and we did have to take our shoes off, and our hostess slash chef, I suppose is what she was in traditional Japanese garb, and she cooked. It must have been a 5-course meal,
if not more.
Yeah, I mean, it just kept going on, and you get very small portions, but when you have a buttload of small portions, it makes for...
Explain buttload.
Okay, so I didn't want to say shitload, but when you have a lot of small pieces to the meal, they add up to a lot of food. And we had a lot of food that night.
And we had a bottle of good sake.
And we had my first real bottle of sake. You can get it. And I'm not quite sure the judgment is still out on the sake for me. Maybe if I drank it a little more often, because I'm a big wine drinker, so it was so different from what the other wines that I'm used to drinking. I would probably have to acquire a taste for that. But we also did some other stuff, like we went to the Noodle Museum.
Oh yeah, we did go to the Noodle Museum.
Because you're a big noodle guy.
Right, but I didn't know if I wanted to spend $30 to go see a box of ramen, but but we still had fun.
Yeah, we did, and we walked around. That's Japan, I will say, is one of the cleanest countries I've ever been to. I mean, it was just immaculate. There was no trash anywhere, and the fun thing about us being there, we got there about 3 days early so that we could adjust to the time and we could see some of Japan before we got on the cruise. And the really funny thing was we could never find a trash bin because they have them hidden, and so they kind of look like they're part of the decoration, so we didn't know where they were. So you walked around with your trash in your hand the whole time because you didn't know where to put it. And we did go to Chinatown, and they saw the Chinese dragon parades.
Oh, that was pretty nice.
Yeah, they had the big dragons that came up behind you and that kind of thing. And we ate some really good traditional Chinese food, which was amazing. And then we just kind of walked around the park and stuff.
One of the things that got me is the 7-Elevens.
That's what I was going to say. The 7-Eleven. So the hotel we stayed at was right next door to a 7-Eleven, thank God, because we didn't know how to get around or what to do.
We wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning,
yes,
wide awake.
You know, when you travel long distances like this, my recommendation is that you go in at least 3 to 4 days early. We got there 3 days early, but we still spent the first 2 days trying to recover, because we'd wake up in the middle of the night about 1 o'clock and we'd stay up till about 3:30, and then you go to sleep, and then you wake up late because you're groggy from being up in the middle of the night. But 7-Eleven. So 7-Eleven had sushi.
All kind of fresh food. I mean, it was just
salads.
And alcohol.
Alcohol, absolutely it did. Fresh coffee, buns. I mean, it made the 7-Elevens in the United States with just the little hot dogs and stuff look like a really sad. In fact, they had foods that were equivalent to me to Starbucks.
Yes.
And then some, because you had traditional Japanese foods there. And people go and eat at 7-Elevens like they would a restaurant. And it was reasonably priced, considering that it was in Japan, and cost can tend to be a little bit more expensive. But they got to know us very well in that 7-Eleven.
Yes, they did.
Because it was...
Every time I'd walk in, it's American is back again.
Yeah, That was kind of a trip, but they're very efficient at the airport. I thought that, from the minute we got there, you saw the efficiency of that country compared to some other places
and
that
they
we've
were
been.
friendly too, because they could tell that we were just kind of lost. We were walking around with our eyes like a deer in the headlight.
Yeah.
And they were very helpful trying to move around the airport to get where we actually had to get.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Because it could be overwhelming, but you just gotta
Yeah.
take your time and be nice to people, and they'll be nice to you in return.
Yeah. The cab drivers were everywhere, and they had doors on their cabs that they could open from the driver's side, which is the opposite side of what we're used to. But all of a sudden the door would open, and all of a sudden the door would close. I thought that was kind of cool.
You see them trying to open the door. No.
Yeah. So then we were there 3 days. We met up with the ship. And we left Yokohama and went to Sapporo, and you decided that you wanted to just spend some time on the ship at that point.
Yeah, I need a little alone time, man.
After being together, stuck like glue for multiple days in a very small space, because let me tell you, the hotel room was smaller than our cabin on the ship.
Right.
Yeah, at the hotel in Japan.
Pretty much had to go in the hallway to change your clothes and stuff.
Not quite, but it wasn't what we were used to in terms of
But
hotel.
can I talk about the bathroom?
Yes, you can talk about the bathroom.
It's the most high-tech bathroom I've seen. I was almost afraid to touch any button because I didn't know what was going to happen. But luckily, they had pictograms on the controls, so not to hit
For the
something.
toilet.
And excuse me, this is for the toilet.
Right.
And I've never seen a toilet that had 9 different controls for whatever you wanted. So I'm not going to get any more detail in that.
Well, I will say this. So they had the pictogram, and so you had a cleansing unit that was a part of your toilet, so you could squirt the front, the back, or the whole body part.
It's like a day on steroids.
On steroids. So yeah, but he would always come back with a nice little smile on his face.
It's got perfect aim.
And the water's warm. That became a really big deal for us. That was the highlight of our hotel room. But the thing is, they have toilets like that in the public restrooms everywhere we went.
But no paper towels to wash your hands with.
That's true. And that was one thing we did find here before we left, that you needed to make sure you had hand sanitizer with you, because soap in public bathrooms is very rare, right? And so, but they got some really nice toilets. So I guess that's why you don't need to wash your hands.
Yeah, I guess you don't. But still.
That's funny. But anyway,
one other thing. They had the washroom where they had the for the washer and dryer, and we were afraid to try to use it because if the toilet was that high tech, I can only imagine what a washing machine and stuff would look like.
That's very, very true. That's very, very true. And the other thing about the washrooms, I know we were obsessed with the bathrooms, but they had some really cool features for like moms and babies. For being able to change your baby, or even nursing in areas for nursing and stuff that were just way above anything I've ever seen anyplace else. So I'm gonna give.
Last time you had a baby?
It's been last century, but I'm gonna give Japan a thumbs up for being one of the cleanest places I've ever been and being very, very efficient. So then we moved on to Sapporo. So Mitchell didn't get off the ship. But our youngest, and David went with and I took a train. They wanted to make sure I had a Japanese experience because they had both been there. And I wanted to see a temple, a Buddhist temple of some sort. So we took a train and went to a beautiful park in Sapporo, Japan. And you walk into this park, and I was telling Mitchell, I said, if they hadn't been with me, I would have walked into this park. It was a beautiful park, but I would have stopped early on, before I got to the good parts, which was actually the temple. and there was a temple kind of at the back of the park, and they had food vendors and all kinds of people there where you could buy crafts and souvenirs. And then you go to this temple, and you could go and you could drop your coin in, and you could say your prayer, and it was just really lovely. I'll have some pictures on Facebook so you can see it. But I got a chance to do that, which was on my bucket list. I didn't get to meditate in a Buddhist temple like I wanted to, but I did at least get to go see a Buddhist temple. So I was quite happy with that. So thumbs up, give another thumbs up to Japan for that. So then let's move on to Russia. So we get to Russia, we go to this one little stop, Petropavlovsk, Petropavlovsk. And first of all, we had heard that you cannot go into Russia unless you have a visa if you're from the United States. But if you signed on to take an excursion that was sponsored by the ship, you would be able to go without the visa. And then the ship realized while we were on it, Norwegian Cruise Line says, okay, we didn't realize that so much. So for people that want to just get off and go into the town, we're going to have buses. We'll charge you $8 to take you back and forth, and that will count as a sponsored excursion for you to be able to go see this small town in Russia. Well, we get there, and it's kind of commercialized. What was it, a shipping yard?
It was, yes, it was the shipyard, and it was the commercial end of the shipyard.
Right. So it wasn't very...
Well, the thing that got me, I don't want to cut you off, is that when you start reading the pamphlets and they start telling you that the KBG and the Army are going to be around and make sure you don't leave outside of this particular area in the town, it was, to me, it's like, I really don't need to see.
Yeah. So you know, people know what's going on. I don't get political on the show. I keep my opinions to myself. Because this is a travel show, and I want you to travel to all places in the world. And if you choose to go to Russia or South Korea, North Korea, any of those places that, you know, even Iraq and Iran, that's your business. So you choose to do that. But we get to Russia, and I just had a problem with going and spending money in a place where I felt like they were trying to sabotage the democracy of other countries. I'll put it like that. And so I chose to stay on board and keep my little happy self and my little bit of money to myself. And that's what I did. But some other people went out, and even our son and David went out. They took the little bus, went to the town. Funny thing that happened with them was, they go into this little art gallery shop kind of a place, and they said that there were pictures of people in there, and they had lots of pictures of their perception of black people from America and what they look like. They had paintings and stuff. So Edwin walks in, my son walks in, and they had never actually seen a black person in person before. So he became the tourist attraction in this little town, but they didn't even stay in there. They didn't stay in the town 30 minutes because before we know it, they were back. And
from what they said, it was really nothing to do. It was
right.
Like 2 shops and the KBG.
Right. So that was Russia. But I've heard some good things about some bigger places in Russia.
And I would probably like to see some different parts of Russia. Maybe,
right.
Go to the Kremlin, go to St. Petersburg,
yeah.
or some other places to see the architecture, because they do.
Right. Yeah, and that was I was kind of looking forward to seeing the architecture in person, but we didn't get to see it. So therefore, it was no big deal. Now.
But I got a Russian stamp on my passport.
We do have a Russian stamp on our passports. That is very, very true. And by the way, they took our passports prior to getting to Russia. They kept our passports until we had left Russia. And then they had to distribute everybody's passports back to them because Russia wanted to make sure that everybody that got off or came on that ship was still on the ship as we were leaving. And they made sure In fact, they had to call a couple people twice because they had somehow not given up their